Okay, that should put me into this mode. Yep. Okay, yeah, I've got headphones on. Okay. Uh, okay. Do that? No. Yeah, so hold on. So this will. Oh no, I broke it. Oh no. Exists. Uh, so the strategy, create execution strategy dot execute async, state, operation, verify succeeded, operation, state. Oh, that's not right. The unnecessary closure piece is bugging me. Okay, let's just move on. Okay, so let's leave that alone for right this second. That's not the problem that I need to fix right this second. So let's go to here. Actually, let's uncheck that. Let's check all that. Let's check everything up until, oh no, that's the initial migration requirement. So, build out components ready for accepting data, structure projects to support requirements. Not the greatest of commit messages, but it'll be fine for now. And then provide migration project to figure migration seed with initial migration. And post. So we have with the migrations there, the migration service is there. So the app host, when it starts, it will initialize the migration service. It will run that. And when that finishes running, it will run the website, right? That's the goal. The thing I was missing was when the website runs, I did not configure an instance of so we have the component, and in this component, we have streamer card. We inject an iStreamer query. And we need to configure that component now because there is one usage. I don't think I have any implementations, find usages. Oh, we have a stream card, ingests a stream query, but we don't have an implementation of that for this side. So in this instance, we want to configure streamer queries. So we need to do this. Application queries, get live streamers, commands. My temptation is to build an infrastructure component around that. We'll worry about share, stream DTR. So it's not API, but it's another kind of the server side of the web thing will have access to the actual application, right? But we need to wrap it up so that there's a common design element between the in the components, so that we can abstract it enough that if we use it in the client, there's an API version available, right? So we'd provide. Well, let's do this right. Let's do. Here's a challenge. Yeah, so we have a slash streamers API already. We need to seed this in some way, shape, or form. How to seed a database through migrations. Data seeding. There you go. So that's that. Use seeding and use async is recommended way of seeding the database with the initial data when working with the EF core. Use SQL Server, use seeding. So I'd really just start WebStorm up again. I didn't mean to. Exit, yes. This, we're going to close that down and do developers.stream, this window. So we can get to the DB afterwards. So we don't want to do it in the migration stuff. We want to seed it with some data so that someone can check out the application and see it working without actually having anything to do. I wanna learn about that one. The execution strategy isn't something I've seen before. Ba, 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 ba. So it would be here where we'd seed it. But this migration service is going to run whenever it's in Aspire. Right, but I don't want to mess around with the DB contacts is what I'm trying to think about, because I want it so that it's just done. So something like let me not jump back to that, jump back to this. So they suggest it in after there. So if we did yeah. So if we did if if debug and if, right? So if it's running in production, that's the strangest way I've ever written that one. Then you could do dot use seeding, or use async seeding, whichever one, and do it this way, which means that it'll only do that in debug and in the migration service. So if you run the migration outside of the service, the migration will just be the migration. Will be the migration. The migration is completely unattached, detached, not unattached, detached from. Yeah, it seems really. Can you have dev dependencies? Good morning, one line, by the way. I was thinking of using something like one of the data libraries. What's it called? It's got a funny name, hasn't it? That allows you to kind of create random data in a pattern. That would be the nicest thing. So you get like random usernames, but it look realistic and stuff. But either let's test this. So let's before we do that. I suppose, why doesn't it let me do that? I suppose the cleaner way of doing this is saying if debug here, else, and if. I'm overthinking this, something wrong. But that way you can just use seeding context. Why don't you like that? Oh, is it? Yeah, it's an action, sorry. Yeah. I got the migrations piece by doing that, right? So the migrations assembly works fine. So migrations get created here. I can just right click on migrations, hit enter, add migration, and it will piece it together. That's working. We can do platform. Yes, I manage my seed data on model creating the DB context, but in a different static class. The method is static void seed. Gotcha. But you don't do that conditionally. Do you wipe that data out? Like, do you plan on removing that when you build it in production, or do you? Yeah. My thought there, or my feeling there, is that yeah, I only want to do that when you're developing it, right? When you're developing it and you're running it up, it should create seed data so it's there. Otherwise, it should just leave it alone because it's just the database. And that way, this context doesn't have any concept of it being seeded. It's just it's just the context. Morning, Delta. So I could add a platform in here. New platform. Name equals Twitch. Right. I suppose this data, this seeding would always be there, right? But yeah. So what I want to do is I want to set this seeding, definitely. This would always happen, potentially. But additional seeding of some sample streamers or some sample whatever, they should only go in when you're running it in debug. They wouldn't go into the full version, but these would. So sometimes you just gotta see it. Yeah. Add range. Can we do it that way? Let's find out. Streamlabs now supports Kick. Saw yesterday. I guess that's because my seed data is a pre-existing data from the already existing database. So yes. Yeah, so you could seed states, you could seed provinces, etc. They're not going to change. They're part of that. You could pull them from somewhere else and load them in theory. Store a data file of some form. So this seed data would always be there. So this would be worth having as a default migration piece. But I do want to get to the adding sample streamers in there so we can show what it looks like when it's got data, so someone can check the project out, open it up, and see a streamer with whatever. Let's see if that does anything. I'm still in the question. I'm still questioning. Let's do that. Add initial seed of platforms. Debug for now. Let's just do that. We'll talk about that design later because that is. I don't use migrations, right? So this is one of the benefits of a migration. I can actually do this. This would be a pain otherwise. My new AI assisted blog article is out. I'll read through that later. I got 3/4 of the way through yesterday. I did have some thoughts. I just got distracted with everything else. My use of AI has increased greatly. increasing article length, writing speed, etc. Interesting. Well, that's a good way of getting your thoughts down, right? I think it's okay to be really rambly to start with. Okay, so, and one line actually, if you have a few seconds to, I could borrow your attention. So right now I have the components, and the component has a streamer card, and in the streamer card I inject the iStreamer query right this second. I do have a query configured for streamer query to call for this to be called. But what I'm contemplating is it's not the API layer. It's kind of another infrastructure layer to me. It's kind of like a direct access piece. I don't want to inject application directly into my component or into this. That would not be. Would that be good? Would that hurt anything into the web? I don't think. Actually, I don't think it is that bad. The problem is the abstraction. It's kind of adding an extra piece. Let's start this up. Uh, 2.8 is like SkyDraw, updated export image, PDF export option, including tiling of images, SVG, fixed, latex, AVIF, PDF plus, image block. Nice. You can code like SkyDraw. That's terrifying. Developers.stream. I think some of that got clipped. I switched to Twitch so I could make the screen bigger. No worries. A little bit of what I was doing is kind of thinking at the same time as I was talking there. Rambling Geek, good afternoon. So let me create a new drawing. This is going to be structure, right? So we have components, we have web, we have web.client, right? So in theory, either of these can use the components. And what I have in here is kind of streamer query. Right. Now, when I configure this, or I configure this, I'm going to need to configure what does streamer query mean, right? So in both of these, I'm going to end up with builder.services.add transient, say, or add scoped iStreamer query. Right, and that's going to reference the infrastructure component of the application, which is fine because it's on this is like the presentation layer, so the infrastructure is still fine on there. And I'm going to bind, in this case, I'm going to bind something like streamer query API client, right? I'm going to build an API client that's going to communicate via the API. In this version, right, I'm going to build streamer application client, something like that, right? Or streamer service to implement that interface. And that service is actually going to end up calling these queries directly, right? So the API is going to call this application layer. I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get this right in my head as far as the ownership and the logic, because this is a new layer. My brain breaks when I notice you are working on a different project. It's why I break to one thing as much as I can. My brain breaks too, especially when I'm making really good progress on the other project. Yeah. And you just made the same mistake my daughter made that we tease her about all the time. When she was little, she was like, "Why does that truck say brain?" Like, no, that says Brian's Tree Service. And so we tease her. Uh, um, it's, so it just made me chuckle because it's kind of an in joke for us. So we see brain all the time. Brain's Tree Service is all around here. I typically just call them whatever the I is. So if streamer query in the server implementation, I is streamer query server and streamer query client. So, but where do you? I mean, I know that this is more clean architecture piece, like organization right second. I'm not sure you necessarily follow along with that, but where do you put those pieces? Do you create an implementation in your website and in your client, or do you create an actual? Do you put them in a layer somewhere? Because the difference is this version is going to call. Let me try and draw it out. So we have API, APIT, API interface server and .NET for mocking, right? And then um, domain, right? So the behavior up there. I'm not sure something at that top level needs an interface. Okay. So the difference is when it's this version of it, this implementation on this side is essentially going to whatever this is, right? Is going to go there, right? That's what's going to happen. Sorry, I like bendy lines. On this side of things, right? This is going to be streamer query API client. And that is going to call into that. All right. Now, essentially, what these are is another infrastructure layer. Right, they live on the outside with the API and the infrastructure because the API and infrastructure presentation and infrastructure are the same level. So the API will also go to stream. Well, no, the API communicates via the application layer. Right, it's just that this version there's no need for having the API in between for that version, which means that what the heck are you doing? Get your line straight, man. Right. So ultimately, they'll call the same data access piece, just the abstractions around them change a little bit. No, no, the API should they be executing code? they should be testing the code, but they should not be running databases and stuff. They shouldn't be building things. You should be abstracting. You're testing the behavior with a unit test, unless you're writing integration tests. That's an integration test. If you're writing to an actual database, that's an integration test. Yeah. Sorry, one line. I'm not trying to dismiss. I'm just trying to. Okay. Um. Morning. Hello, important guy. I think about. I think of the application layer very differently. Okay. Um. So you'd have this. You'd have this version or this version calling this directly, and then they both do the thing. The problem I have because of the design I've chosen so far is that the abstraction, the not necessarily the abstraction, adapter application domain. The API alert for me is just something that forwards incoming client requests that use the Streamer Query API client implementation to the Streamer Query server. Yeah. Okay. Godzo, thank you very much for the follow, by the way. I appreciate that. I didn't see that. So the challenge of that is this. The problem is this is kind of a presentation layer, right? This could be considered at the same level as the API. Whereas this is the client. This needs the abstract. This needs that interface. But where do I put those pieces, right? So I can. So infrastructure lives on the outside. The actual card, the piece. This needs the generality because how we provide it is data is either. So this is server side and this is client side. We can use that component in server or client and have and switch it between. Yeah. Yeah, we could build those up inside of these. So it's shared components so that the Blazor server or Blazor client can run with it. But on the client, it's obviously running with an API. No worries. No worries. I see where you are. Mrox, good. How about you? Ads will start in 3 minutes. If you ever get stuck behind ads, and you want to hear what I'm talking about, just let me know and I will stop and resume when the ads are over. Um, Because really, what I've got here is I've got a need to kind of create I almost let me mock it out a little bit. Source developers dot stream dot adapters, right? So, oh, why did I do that? Class library. Okay, let's delete that. Well, that's my that's the problem. So if I create a streamer query server client, right, and a streamer query API client, right, and this implements and this implements. Thoughts on making components a package? How would it become a well? it could potentially become a package, but it's going to have dependencies on interfaces. So there's going to be an abstractions necessary. So right now that abstraction lives in here, in iStreamer query here, in the infrastructure layer of the application. Right. Use some kind of UI library. I don't know right a second. We're going to see what it looks like. Blazor is not my forte. It is it is something that we'll have to see. So components here is kind of like the streamer card wrapped up, right? So there's some behavior there again, so we can share it. The abstractions again, they could live outside of this, but they'd have to be implemented somewhere. So I'm going to create this as adapters right now. This is basically solving this problem. They're essentially at the infrastructure layer, right? They're essentially at the same level as this, right? They just are um yeah, we'll play with that when we get to it. Like UI and stuff, I'm not too panicked about at this second. Once I open this up, people will have the option to kind of give their opinions and share. We'll see. So if you haven't been in for a while, if you haven't seen what this project is developers.stream. It is a application design or a platform designed to support discoverability and uh, um, and promotion of developers who stream. Yeah. So this would be HTTP client. This would need to get all of its stuff from the the API, and this one is going to have direct access to this piece, is my thought. That's a really weird way of doing it though, to create adapters. I don't see how these live in they don't live in different places. Like this piece here essentially could live here. There's no reason for it to not live there. Them living in the same place, this library takes on a lot of dependencies that could be split. They do for you. Shared server, shared client. I don't like that design. I appreciate you taking that time. Please do not feel any uh how do I put it? Commitment, not commitment. Oh, man, I can't think of the word. But please do not stress yourself over it. It's just one of those pieces we're gonna find our equilibrium on this. Obligation. Thank you. Do not feel any obligation. And now here's part one. um, the only thing I use projects given. The only thing I use the projects given to me by the Blazor web app project are to configure the services and such used by the web app. The components project has all the UI and that's for the interfaces that are configured in whatever program CS gets run. I move app.razor and the layout and all of that into the component library. This is so that I could have whatever application type as long as I can point to app razor. For example, adding a Maui project would be create a new Maui app, configure it in Program CS with the correct interface implementations, and point the Blazor web view to the app razor in the component library. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Right. So you move all of this into that so that you can just start it up and run the pieces you need. Okay. Okay. This does give some interesting challenges to the whole uh onion clean architecture, however you want to put it. In the so infrastructure and API. So API is essentially a presentation layer, right? And on the diagram, API and infrastructure live in the same circle on the outside, right? On the inside of that circle is the application circle, and on the inside of that is the domain. So the API and the infrastructure never touch the domain. The domain is where all the business stuff lives. Right. The application layer is kind of the interface to that thing. The application kind of references to infrastructure so that it can do database and stuff. Um, yeah. I was watching slightly tangential. I was watching a video by Vaughan Vernon this morning on vertical slice architecture, and it's amazing just how abstract we keep a lot of these things. Oh yeah, we just move this and do this, and this is this, and this is this, and everything's open to interpretation because no one actually wants to commit to here's the right way to do this, and when they do, they all differ. Like we saw with clean architecture implementation, right? There's some general threads. And like I'm saying, that's why I'm kind of aligning this in the same way, right? API and infrastructure live on the outside of that circle. They're the kind of the outside. They're the interactions with the system. So I'm thinking that these libraries are infrastructure client and infrastructure server, right? Essentially. They're implementations of this contract. And nothing says I can't have 10 infrastructure libraries, right? There's nothing saying that there only has to be one and it has to fit neatly. The shared kernel, we use this for streamer DTO right now so that we can actually get the data transfer through. But yeah, let's do this. Let's create those projects. Source, class library, developers.stream.infrastructure.server. So to your design one line, this is closer, but not close enough. I see why you do what you do, and I kind of understand it. But this is kind of like the shared for those things, right? They're not shared necessarily in that respect, but we'll see. We'll see how it feels this way. Streamer client. Now, infrastructure can access application. Streamer morning module. Streamer. So the server version is over here, right? And that references iStreamer query. Being that they were in the infrastructure layer, that's fine. Can I inject? Is that right? Can infrastructure have a reference to application? Do I do that? That might not be right. 2 more posts, then I'm stepping away to refill my coffee, but I'll be back in about 10 minutes. So then the API is a way for client to be able to get the app backend to do stuff. It's just a bunch of API endpoints that the client implementation of the interfaces with methods are pretty much taking the parameters and use the server implementations. Example, a method in iStreamer query might be get streamer info, and the client there will be a call to client service to get streamer info, which is implemented with something that was a way HTTP client get from JSON. Yeah, the API endpoint is get streamer info, which calls the server service. Right? Yes. We're not a million miles away from it, each other on that one. I guarantee. No, this can't have references to application. That's bad. That's not good. To call that infrastructure, it's the naming that's the difficult part here, not necessarily the actual thing. I can solve it very quickly. I just want to make sure that it's sensible. So if you just joined, what we're deciding is how do we get the implementation of iStreamer query into the application pieces that in their respective versions, right? That has to be that as well, by the way. So when running in the client, we want to be able to use these components, right? So we do want the option of using the component, whether it be on the client or the server. So these components will never know what they're using, and it saves us duplicating code. Pro. Con, we now have to implement 2 versions of the same thing to support that. Putting them in the same library is bad. Treating them as infrastructure, again, naming wise, treating them as infrastructure. Infrastructure can't have a reference to application, but API can have an application reference, and they're both on the same circle. Let's bring up the clean architecture diagram. We'll find an appropriate version of it. I'm sure there's not a million ones. So you see DB, UI, web, devices, infrastructure, and presentation, right? Controller gateways, presenters on the inside, application in the use case. So this is kind of like the basics, like CRUD stuff lives in the application business rules for me. No, we're not creating a custom component library. We're not trying to create buttons and widgets and stuff here. We're trying to create the streamer card. If we decide to use Blazor, that's referenced in there, I assume. We're taking dependency on the thing. Yeah, here we go. Presentation, infrastructure, persistence goes into application. Application goes into domain. Application doesn't reference presentation or infrastructure or persistence. So when we define the database, when we define the repository, application only gets an interface to a repository. It doesn't get a DB context, right? So it's moved away. So yeah. So what I'm considering here is basically another slice of this, right? I'm talking about devices or web or whatever, right? I'm not talking, the API lives out here. You can see everyone's different versions of the same thing: IO, API, devices, UI. So I don't think I'm wrong in any way, shape, or form thinking of these two components as living in this outer circle. They can both then reference inside, right? So they kind of are at the same level of infrastructure. It's just coming up with a reasonable name that is clear. So, um, so funny. See, the traditional one, the we need to adapt things one. Yep, no worries. So if you are new to the stream, if you are just joining and you have questions, please feel free to ask. There's no stress on getting this done. It's just exploration. If you haven't seen this project, this is developers.stream. This is a project aimed at supporting and promoting developers who stream. It will be an open source project. Once we have the basics up and running, it will be using .NET, Blazor, and Aspire to run on, which is at least one technology I'm familiar with. The others are still, yeah. So it's funny. Hey Frank, how you doing? Welcome in. Happy Friday. Um, we start off with this, and then people are like, but where do I put this? Where do I put that? Where do I put this? Where do I put that? Right? We keep asking those questions. And then we need some clarification, right? IO, external interfaces, infrastructure, devices, all lives in the outside. These can all know about each other. They can do whatever they want. APIs, so we've got like we start to like adapt to layers, right? Application layer, domain layer, right? Well, where's the actual clean architecture version of this? In all these pictures, you're telling me the clean one isn't actually presented. Hot take, clean architecture is a psyops by Uncle Bud to see how far his reach can go. Um, it's at the end of the day, it does not matter one little bit what label you put on the architecture you use, right? What matters, which is a tenet of what he's talking about, is that the code is predictable, easily understood, easily maintainable, right? You've heard me say it a million times. This is not the quest I'm going down right this second is a bit silly, to be honest. It's because I know what I need to do. I just don't want to name it something. It's the naming that's tripping me up, right? So I have this and this, right? If I create uh developers.stream dot question mark dot server and a dot client version. That's okay. Shared is, in my opinion, a little general for me, right? And a little general to share with everyone else, right? Shared kernel, things that are definitely shared between PCs that do need to be referenced from all over the place, absolutely. But these are not referenced from all over the place. These are inputs, and they are adapters, I suppose. Um, their presentation layer, they are on that outside circle. They are useful here, but they do have different designs slightly. Um, like the server version essentially sits at the same layer as the API, whereas the client version kind of sits on a different layer and communicates via the API. Um, and that's the slight difference between what one line does is creates the server version to communicate, and then the API calls the server version, right? Whereas I'm going to call down into the application in both instances. So just one happens to be at the application, goes into the application, and one goes into the API, which then goes to the application, right? So they're almost the same thing, but just different enough. Let's go with this. My question with adapters is, and again, the reason I'm mindful of clean architecture is it's a good thing to align around something, and something that people understand and have used or have looked at or studied is good, because it means that there's a starting point of familiarity. If I diverge too far from that and start making up my own stuff, it's harder for someone to come in and comprehend the code, and that's not what I want. I want people to be able to pick this up with a quick understanding, and we can draw a picture for certain, but it's a kind of, it's worth this consternation. It's that moment when you say a word and wonder, a state of great alarm, agitation, dismay, no, amazement or horror, no, fear, no, it's not consternation. Um, it's not fear. It, it, my vocabulary is poor. But either way, it's worth the time to think through it. If I call it adapters, though, adapters in that diagram are, well, there's ports and adapters, there's onion architecture, there's all sorts of different names and different designs. Ultimately, they come from, I need to get stuff from the client to the server, whether that client be, uh, you know, web or otherwise. But adapters will um, bring up another image, so I've got to be careful with adapters. Let's go with that. Let's go with clients, that's going to read weird. Um, no, 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 no. Can't do clients. Can't do clients. That's going to create a really silly name. Developers.stream. Let's do something. Let's get it working. We can always revisit. And if you are feeling any way engaged, any opinions, you're more than welcome to share. You're more than welcome to pass opinions. So this will be the summary in next two posts, plus hopefully some equivalent. Streamers query. So right. It's worth actually doing this sort of stuff, considering these sorts of things. The API, the interfaces you use, the names you give things, the structure to the code will make a big difference to its maintainability, to how quick you can revisit the code. What we do is we put this in there and we see how people feel about it, right? And if people debate it or they want to change it, then they can make the right changes and we can have the right discussions at the right time. But the most important thing is, am I confident that I can change this quickly, right? Streamer API client, right? And this is an iStreamer query. Online, I sincerely appreciate, as always, your persistence here. I'm going to try something. Public static delegate void figure. Can you do that? Is it that way? It's not. It's static configure. I think I want to try afterwards, but again, diversion. Okay, so now we have adapters server, adapters client. On the server side, this would inject an iSender, right? Because this is going to essentially reference application. Mashiko, thank you very much for the follow. Welcome in. We can do that. And in here, we can do, okay, maybe 4 posts after the previous, including this one. 3 left. No worries. I appreciate it, one line. I truly do appreciate it. So in this instance, we're going to get the client server service. In this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to do, that's interesting that I made it. I probably want to make that a task, if I'm honest. Okay. I hope I was able to clearly communicate approach to typically take. The projects I use are shared models, all things used everywhere. DTOs, interfaces, enums, other abstractions. Shared server used by all server-side things like the API, Blazor web app running in server mode, Signal hub, application that runs directly in the server. Shared client used by all client-side things like Blazor web app running in Wasm, Maui app, or other desktop native apps. There's UI which lives separately in the component library. It only uses the shared models, interfaces, and base classes. The running app determines which services to use. All apps point to the entry point in the component library. All that said, I'm certainly not saying this is the right way, but one way that I believe is easy to maintain, extend, and even change the application type without needing to change the UI nor core functionality code. And with that said, I'm not indicating that you need to do this, just showing one approach that might be able to adapt portions of or none at all. I appreciate that. Essentially, whether we call that shared or we leave that as adapters, I'm only calling that adapters because it kind of fits in with the whole clean architecture thing. But essentially, those services, those pieces that are necessary for the server to interact with the components would live there. The components, I agree, would never have, yeah, infrastructure domain shared kernel. Yeah. I think we're in the same place with different labels. Yeah, this makes sense to me. This asynchronous, because that's going to be an API call, and this is going to be, yeah. So what we do is we do await sender dot send get streamers dot query new get live streamers dot query. That needs to change afterwards. Um, there you go. I've never opted to learn the formal names of the patterns I employ because another 20-page paper on my reasons for that. That's perfectly fine. Again, all I'm trying to do is try to align a little bit to clean architecture for familiarity purposes. I am sharing this publicly, right? And it's consistent. The only reason I changed to try and align to clean architecture on Liquid Sky was because I realized that as I'm presenting it every day, if I can have something where someone can say, well, why shouldn't that fit there? It's better for me. So this will cause a problem. This being called adapters will cause a problem, but I want it to. If it does, right, it will create a conversation that's useful. But ultimately, this is your client, and so this is the shared in your world, as I see it right this second, right? Because then over here, what we do is we do that references server, and that references streamer API client, and that references client. And there we go. Hey, Frank, if you're still around, are you streaming today? You stream on Fridays normally. Frank's an awesome streamer. Very friendly, very helpful, very knowledgeable, and just a great place to go and hang out. As always, there's a lot of .NET streamers. There's a lot of dev streamers that are awesome to go and hang out with, but there are more .NET streamers than you realize. Frank is one of them. So there we go. That builds now, right? With that as that, we have a very rough implementation. Now this can take HTTP. Obviously, we'd have to configure the HTTP client here, and this isn't just add scoped. We need to do builder.services.add HTTP client. So there's whatever that is. System. Is that still necessary? I thought that was not necessary anymore to do that. I didn't think you needed to do that anymore. Yeah, add HTTP client. Where is it from then? Oh, is it extensions HTTP? Well, it's not. So from this perspective, it is HTTP client, but from here to add it, builder.services.add HTTP. There we go. Streamer API client. Configure. Right. So this is where we're going to need to worry about Aspire. Yeah. That's Microsoft.extensions.http, by the way. This would set the address. So configure.base address equals new URI. How do you get a Spire's host? So that's going to start the web up. Huh. It'd be service defaults, right? No? Not service defaults. Open to Aspire Blazor web client get URL. Ooh. That's not. How do I get that configuration from within? Yeah, Aspire doesn't replace. I take to look. URI HTTPS plus. Oh. Okay. Yeah, Mojo's not paying attention. Mojo's off going proving. Mojo's doing anything. Mojo's going off doing things I'm trying to do in here. And I'm doing them badly. So does that mean that? So HTTP plus HTTPS web, is that good enough? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So in this side, we would want to. Oh, I don't like this. Var. Well, hold on. We have a decision to make before we do this. Structure out client and server adapters for Blazor pieces to interact. Back end services. To do, that's fine. Okay, I'll push this at the end of the stream, by the way, if you are interested in learning. If you are interested in doing more with this, if you want to ask more questions, you have opinions on it, you want to talk more, there is a Discord linked in the cards below. For some reason, Streamlabs won't let me configure that anymore. My problem is that I don't get a lot of time off stream that I want to go and spend administering the stream. So that is a failing of myself, not necessarily the tools that I'm talking about. Yeah. When I'm off stream, if I'm coding, I want to be coding. I do not want to be spending time trying to figure out how to configure shoutouts and callouts and stuff in the stream. Why I'm trying to build a platform to help us do that. Okay. Opinions. Okay. On the API side of things, this is obviously feasible, right? So there is /streamers. Do we want to continue that pattern now, or do we want to introduce fast endpoints to start with, or do we want? I'm going to offer it, but I don't want to offer it. Do we want to use controllers? I'm going to assume no. Fast endpoints comes with a bit of a learning curve, but would give us the ability to structure this a little neater. Yeah. Any thoughts? But I wanted to raise that anyway. So var request equals new equals client dot get async. Oh wait, get async. Does that actually know about that? Oh, it does. Nice. Oh, cool. I probably don't get that on the other side because I'm using. Okay, so we're gonna leave that as yeah. Option taken away. In the default HTTP client configuration for program CS in the client project for Blazor web app. Your client base address equals new, yeah, followed by add scope, get required service, HTTP client factory, create client, your client name. Gotcha. Okay. I think we probably have to pass in cancellation token here. Just for good practice. Oh, there you are. Finally. I was asking questions about Aspire and you weren't around and decided to scrap it because you weren't here to defend it. Var response equals request dot if request dot is success status code. Where else better do you have to be sat watching this struggle? I don't know. Kids. It's not gonna like that. It's not gonna like that either because the default is null. You in fact are, unless. What was I gonna ask then? Sorry. We may have a yeah, that's sad. Planning items. We need to get fast endpoints to expose the API endpoints because that'd be very cool. Sorry, I had a bit of a moment. Oh, before the end of the stream, remind me. I need to open this in Visual Studio before I even say this is free to go ahead and play with. I need to open it in Visual Studio and be valid. Is the Aspire query of a reminder delete Visual Studio? Actually, Visual Studio installer. Need to update that. Update. It's wrong of me to assume that everyone's going to use Rider. The question has not really gone away. I'm not messing around with preview. By the way, Mojo. So on this side, when I had the HTTP client, right? Um, what if the job requires you to have and use Visual Studio? Then you use Visual Studio. That is perfectly legitimate to do. Whether you like it or not is not really the problem. It's the tools that you are provided as part of a job. I use Visual Studio Code at work. I don't like using it. What I do. Dear. Gotta remember, sarcasm does not always carry on Twitch chat. Uh, so when I'm referring to the client, I want to use the base address. Is that what I'm using when I'm referring to it? Is it going to expose that as web? Yeah. Visual Studio, there's nothing necessarily wrong with Visual Studio. I'm not trying to be critical of Visual Studio. I'm just trying to remember that people don't use Rider, and as good as it isn't free. If this project isn't going to make money. The intention is not to make money off this project. The intention is to make this a project that is shared, and I will host a version of it. But all this code will be available at the end of this stream. All the stuff I've been working on today will be available here. Right now, I do not want to take contributions purely because I want to get this in a good place. But yeah, but I will build it in Visual Studio by the end of the stream to make sure. Really? Is that a coincidence that I'm running Visual Studio Installer in the background? Oh, we'll take an answer. We'll take a look if I need it. Right now, I don't need it. I just need to just need that clarifying. I wish you luck with securing a job, Mashiko. So we're gonna get that result equal. So var result equals. No, there was no question. You said they haven't hired me yet. I said, well, good luck with securing the job. I think of it like Docker networking. Request. Oh, this is in bad shape. Note to self. Don't run Visual Studio Installer in the background. Rider is dependent upon pieces that Visual Studio is currently tearing apart. Okay. Insert hold music here. I can't do very much because if I cancel it, it'll be messed up. One day I'll be able to explain clearer over chat. You heard my brain churning last night. So for reference, if you are ever interested, we do often hang out in Discord. These days, it has become quite a thing, quite a great part of my day, to be honest. We hang out, we talk about things, we share ideas, we talk about Liquid Sky, we talk about the projects, etc. So, and anyone is more than welcome. I can't build this right this second. Until Visual Studio finishes its thing, it's going to be... That was not bright of me to do that midstream, but yeah. So that's... Well, I'm looking at the... Are you sure about that? Yeah. Which part? Keep talking, no one explodes. Yeah, it's in Visual Studio stomped all over that. So what I want to do by the end of the stream is get this running and see the data and maybe get one of these queries to happen, right? That's what I was trying to aim for. We may combine the getting it working in Visual Studio and making that happen into the same steps, but we'll see. So if not today, we resume on Monday with this, right? I think we've got the structure in a good enough place. I think I can describe this, because what I want to do is I want to document it, right? I want to set some standards in place, and we're going to have a talk about standards. My standards are my standards. This is an open source project. People are going to contribute, hopefully, to this project. I am the maintainer, but I want to make sure that there's a sense of shared ownership. Yes, my code is going to die. In reality, from past experience with doing open source projects, trying to start projects that are for community like this, the likelihood is I'm going to do a lot of this up until the point where someone... So in the past, I've had people like Junicus, who's done amazing work on the front end stuff, who's added, like with the Drink Water project, he added the loading, the progress icon. That was amazing, right? We learned some things along the way there. But in general, I haven't had much look. That doesn't mean I don't want there to be progress on this. It doesn't mean I don't want there to be some success. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I document this design, that we kind of talk about standards. Maybe we set up the editor config, maybe we don't. But there should be consistency. It's a very key piece of developing software like this, right? Is making sure that this is consistently understood and easily understood. So, documenting things like this. There is a standard, and I don't know if anyone's seen this. Kind of like RFCs. What is it? The design, there's a pattern. Architecture decision records. This is it. What you do, there's this template, and when we make a decision, we document the ADR and store it in the repo. And it's an interesting concept. But what it does is you store the ADR with the repo. If something comes along and changes that, it's a revision of the original. The original record still is maintained. You then store a new record and you say it deprecates this version, etc. So there's a few different versions of this, but it's an interesting concept because it's like, okay, what do we consider? Why do we decide this thing? it records that point in time. I think it's kind of interesting, an interesting point. The reason I raise it, I'm not necessarily saying we're going to do ADRs in developers.stream, but it's how do we record decisions? How do we record patterns and layout and stuff like that to better help developers coming into it? Oh, it looks like Visual Studio's finished enough of the pieces that I've got my code back. Var response equals request dot. What? Why is my brain content dot interesting? So that's going to be that dot read JSON async. INumerable ETL. All right. Let's make it simpler. How does that do that? Var result equals because asynchronous. What does that mean? Two hardest things for me in this will be understanding the difference between PostgreSQL and SQL when it comes to that, what pitfalls are we might run into while constructing the queries. The second is if we aren't able to use CSS to write the CSS. We can talk about that. We can definitely enable that. I have no issues with using SCSS. To me, the client side, if it's not apparent by now, is kind of like yeah, that can be whatever it wants to be. I understand the client can lead the server. I understand the client can lead the requirements. It's not quite like the tail wagging the dog though, and I do consider the back end to be tool chain wise, that's going to be a challenge. It might be that you get to, if you want to put SCSS in there, you're more than welcome to, but you document how to configure the tooling. Possible null reference. Possible null reference. That's going to be I mean, that's basically that. Can you do enumerable empty stream DTL? That's what I want. Okay, it was that way. If it's essentially equates to that. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Okay. Oh, come on. Visual Studio is still installing, by the way. Awesome. Is there ever a reason to return null or always an empty object? Um, Depends on how you're designing things. Null's not ideal. The recommendation is to return an empty list because then nothing will break calling this. If this doesn't convert or this it doesn't succeed, you just get nothing back because that's the best way to handle that for the client right a second. This one will always send something back. Null is considered not good practice these days. Having you know looked at a lot of code with null checks in it, and it's still part of my process. I these days I like using result. I do like using result type more and more, rather than returning null or throwing exceptions when I don't get what I expect. Yeah, come on. It won't build until that. So let's commit those things. Create basic implementations. Streamer implementations. Streamer query. Server and client components. I try not to extend code domain of a function. The client can't know if a function can return null or not without looking inside of it, and the client needs to check if every single time. Interesting. When there are so many people that are like, make sure you pay attention to space and memory use to the 100th of a nanosecond, it's interesting to hear that the new trend is don't return null, instead returning an empty object. It's don't do harm to the other side. Why make the user return null when it doesn't benefit them because they're going to have to handle that case? Return an empty object, and now they don't have that issue. As long as, by the way, and Ian, and thank you for the cursed code windows, because an empty object is more dubious than null. Dubious? I'm not sure I agree there. Dubious? So in this case, I call an API, I expect to get a list of streamers back. What does returning null do? Well, null just says, I couldn't cast it, or I didn't get anything back, or it failed, right? So on the client now, I have to say, if null, then do something else, right? But it doesn't matter to the client. The consumer of this, it doesn't matter. Nothing came back, right? If nothing comes back and I expect it to come back, I'm going to debug that code anyway, but the client behavior will not fail if this doesn't do what it should do, and the client won't fall over. It's on me to if this blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I didn't get water before I started stream. If this is failing, it's failing on the server side. It's on me to understand that and log that. The client will stay up, and at the very worst, a user would not see streamers, but we would not then force that problem down into the consumer of this API. You know me, I was returning a response model of some sort for my API. I don't really return an empty string. I just use exceptions to invalidate stack. But in that case, if there's a problem on the server, then throwing the exception is the right thing to do, right? And log that. The client just says, I didn't get anything. Yes, an empty object is more dubious suspicious, meaning a null, meaning I didn't find results. An empty object means I'm returning a thing that looks like a valid object but doesn't have real data. Well, if this returns an empty object, two things happened. One of two things happened. It got a non-success status code, or it couldn't cast whatever we sent it to the right object. It's not the client's problem. Why force the client to deal with the invalid state of the API when it's the server problem? We can still, if we're debugging this, we can still see that caused an error. We can still see that API. We don't have to do that, but the client stays open. We don't end up with an exception in the code that, or having to write code that tells the story that we might receive null from this. If we receive null, then something happened. What are you going to do on the client in this case? The consumer of this code, the client, we now write in this component, right? Right. If we do query, right, public IEnumerable streamer DTO, all streamers, say, return query dot get streamers. Hi, Magnetonics. How you doing? Some isolated CSS, some issues that would like to see improved. For example, if you have isolated CSS, it all gets bundled into one big CSS, and that all gets locked up front. There's no way to preload on when it's going to be used. Okay. In the client, if object is null, I can show we didn't find results. But if you return an object, I could find it more confusing to show a valid UI for the client, but it'll have empty data. Well, it's the same as no results. But here, if I have to deal with a null, var results equals that. If results is null, do what? Right? It's still it's still found no results, whether it's empty or it's a null. It's just a cleaner way of handling it and not putting this requirement on the client by having that as an empty list. Why it failed is not the concern of the consumer here. Right? It's just passing that problem down, right? The null is just not helpful. It keeps the client working. The client just says there's no results found because empty is the same as I got no results. Yeah. I don't want to say no way. I'm not aware of how to do this. There is some clever usage of the head outlet that you might employ to dynamically load CSS used by components, and they're displayed. Huh. Magnetonics, how's the game coming along, by the way? I haven't been able to catch a stream. I haven't caught a lot of streams of late, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, as long as it just comes down to preference, I suppose, in that case, as far as, what's the right way? I don't know, but there is definitely a preference on why. Let's try and open this in Visual Studio now. A dev stream. Nope, wrong one. Prototypes. Platform, dev project stream, dev projects stream, developers.stream. I've got like 4 versions of developers.stream. That's awesome. I seen out pre-alpha at the end of the year. It's pretty scuffed, but I got some great feedback. I took January off, and I'm going to get back into it starting tomorrow. Nice. That's awesome. Great progress. Let me know if you end up contributing UI to this project, then that way I can avoid it. Wow. Come on, Visual Studio. Time to wake up. You can do it. Build solution. I was putting laser loading components. It's used in every Vue project I've seen. It's pretty easy. Don't know about Blazor though. So many different ways of going about development. So many different like approaches. And again, that's what I'm talking about. Like in terms of standards, in terms of practices, it's hard to just go and lay things out to start. And we will take the time to kind of document some of these things and talk about things. And I'm open to opinions. I'm not saying that what I've said is right. You know, it's my opinion. I see the benefits. I see the pros and cons of both directions, right? I didn't deliberately just open this one. So slow. Okay, so we have two versions. We don't have data seeded for that particular piece, right? So the streamer's query, it feels very strange to navigate this. I mean, maybe because of my font size being so big, but so this is going to go to live stream. It's going to go live streamer spec, which is going to get a list of streamer, which is going to get ID, name, and blurb from the streamer and bring the streamer detail. There's no channels, so we don't have to worry about that. We haven't tested any of this yet, so this is going to be interesting, but let's do this. Context.set streamer add range. That'll do. Streamer one is going to be one line. Streamer two. So we start this up. I'm done deep dives in how components are loaded, but I am not really bogged down by CSS loading at the moment for the apps I work on, but I could see the need to defer loading of CSS even when using isolated CSS, and no need to apologize for having a technology preference. I love you is kind of sarcastic. Okay, so we're running the container. We've started the PostgreSQL thing. We are erroring. I'm throwing an exception now. User transaction is not supported with the transaction suppressed migrations or retrying execution strategy. Excuse you. What? No, we don't restart when we just hit an error. My bet there is more than likely that, but let's see. No. Not supported exception. Oh, interesting. So what that's suggesting is, so we have this execution strategy. Hold on, let's initialize DB context, run migrations, ensure database async, run migrations, begin transaction, migrate async. Oh, but that's migrations, not crazy. That's basic. One day I'll understand Vue and Angular. Next and Blazor have similar structures. So what does that mean? So to resolve this, you should use. Is that because that's not? No, it's not. It's not that. Oh, there's a strategy. It's part of the strategy. So is that because that? Let's see. Um, I guess I mean I'll understand SPA framework. Something loses me in the SPAs. Again, I think that a well-built client by someone who knows what they're doing is it's it's just as much effort and just as much um, talent required for a very well built front end in a major application to a back end. I think, um, yeah. And I come to the internet sim. I don't think Blazor has a way to do that. When the app is built, it takes all the isolated CSS and bundles it into one, which eventually gets pulled up into the main apps, bundle CSS and all of that. I've looked at many open source repos. It's all chaos. Chaos happens whenever you get developers together. If you get developers together that are not aligned, right? Frank was streaming today. No, it's not his schedule. Hmm. Okay, I guess I get to learn about this. So it doesn't like that. Do we need to do in our seeding over here? Should we be using async seeding and then add range async? Does this then take a cancellation token as a question? Bool argument indicates whether any store management operation was performed. Cancellation token. Wait. 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 Go await all the things. Oh, Broken Sword knows all about execution strategies. I know nothing about it. I use transactions and all, but I haven't been using execution strategy. I don't know this, which is why I'm asking. Do you need to use execution strategy for the seed method? I don't know. I guess we'll learn. That's kind of, I haven't used execution strategy before because I haven't done this. Hey, Mo Wobbler. How you doing? Let's give it one more try, and then we'll have to do some more research for Monday. Yeah, not user transaction is not supported with the transaction suppress migrations or retrying execution strategy. See, let's. I obviously changed two things at once there, which is probably not the smartest thing to do. I mean, Visual Studio is doing okay with this right now. It's just, and I should be building in Visual Studio, as it is the most likely tool that people are going to use building this. Thought it was delete Visual Studio. No one said anything about uninstall. Either this is the longest migration in history. Console migration. For my knowledge, if I do contribute, does Postgres support transactions? Yes. Postgres, yeah. Postgres is a database we're moving to use from SQL Server in some projects I work with, and MySQL, as it is seemingly preferred. Okay, so that failed for whatever reason. Can I connect that database is the question. PostgreSQL. And what are the username and password am I going to use on it? I instinctively go to Rider. That's fun. Migration service. Yeah, well, I want to see if I can connect to it. Developers.stream. So that says developers.stream, get connection string, app settings, no app settings. But it says it created it, right? Does it create as a container? Yeah, there you go. Open that in the browser. Yeah, that ain't working. Relax, guys. Relax. Nope, that does not work. So the web portion of it does not work. Database developers.stream does not exist. Let's just have a check. Ah, with reference, wait for PostgreSQL add database. In DB creator exists. If not exists, create. That's the ensure database part, right? See, I don't like DB creator, create. But it got to migrations, so it has to have got here, which means it has to have got here. This is the migration service. That's PG Web. That's adding the database. Adds a PostgreSQL database to the application model. Oh boy, do you have an actual dot in the database? It's this. No, that the I had a dot. It threw an exception there. So if I do have a dot somewhere, then that's a problem. Yeah, that's that. But that's not. Well, that's tiny. I don't see anything challenging there. Let's give it one more run and see what happens. Because my browser window is small. Hello, Loki Doke. Hello, buddy. Oh, big stretch. Console logs, yeah, failed. Select from migrations history. Create database developers.stream. I mean, we could assume that it's the naming. Yeah, it's not working. It's not running that. That fails. So anyway, okay. Sadly, it is that time. Frank is not streaming. Monospace Mentor's playing American Truck Simulator while answering your questions. I'm trying to finish not mind debbing on the cold segment. Okay. It said running. Okay. I'll run that once more just for validation. At least this is closing Windows down. It's not running new Windows every single time. Okay. Yes, you are right, actually. Sorry. Channels, labels, platforms, streamers. Oh. Well, that's just annoying, isn't it? It's failing because it's there. Ah. Okay. I do not have much more time left. Let's remove this. Let's remove this. Apparently this conflicts, and the better way to do the migration is to use the async seeding when you're using that. So that's a bit of a lesson learned. We'll come back on that afterwards. So we want to do what? So how much RAM does Liquid Sky eat? What does Rider eat for Liquid Sky? I mean, obviously that's going to change as I open stuff, right? Taskbar, Task Manager. Three gig, unless you count the backend as well, in which case just shy of 6 gig. Yeah. Visual Studio with this Aspire project is eating almost 2. Not running. So let's get changes correct. What the heck? Change that. Oh, I removed the. Okay, that's fine. That's fine for now. Correct the database migration, verified, migrating, but won't get to launching site. So we just got to get past the sticky point of it gonna get past the sticky point of it failing on that migration piece. It's clearly done the migration, the data's there, but it's saying that it's not there. Hey Napalm. However, you know what time it is. You are wait, you know, catching me this time. So on Monday, we will get that working. We'll push through that piece. We'll share getting that working. And then by the end of Monday's stream, the goal will be to be able to see the cards represented for the streamers that we have stubbed in there, right? So the migration will validate that piece is working, and we'll start to build out some of those components, those queries, those things, and hopefully by the end of Monday's stream, we have the ability to check out the site, run it, and have it display the streamers, and that moves forward. So hopefully by the end of next week, we are in a really good place from a productivity standpoint, where next Friday we can see maybe get into the creating users and stuff. But I will also spend some time documenting out standards and things like that, and we can have those discussions. So I don't know, Zones. I don't know if you just gave up on me. It's like discussions like that might seem unnecessary, but it's worth setting the standard. It's worth setting that practice in place and setting out, okay, in the event we decide that the right thing to do is return a null there, what should the pattern look like on the other side so we are consistent in how we're dealing with the same thing? In all teams, some of these conversations seem really petty, but you shouldn't let people just go off and do the thing they want to do. It's not healthy for the project. It's not healthy for the maintainability of the project. So I would highly recommend having the conversations, even if they feel a little bit frustrating at times or a little bit futile. That being said, let's go and raid Moonies today. There are no dev streamers streaming that I've seen. Monospace Mentor is streaming DevOps questions, but he's also playing a game. So I'd rather jump into someone who's doing development. Muniz is a game developer developing an actual application game, like a GeoGuessr style game in Unity. I will be back on Monday. I do want to say thank you very much for everyone that's coming hanging out on a daily basis. I am seeing a big difference in the viewership of the stream, and I really do appreciate it. I hope that you feel comfortable contributing and discussing things. And again, if you are interested in doing that sort of stuff, you're more than welcome to join the Discord. Talking about community, it is Friday. I assume, One Line, that you are having community day. One Line is a great supporter of me and the community at large, and on Fridays hosts a community day where he opens up his Discord. You can drop in and talk about software development and programming in general and technology, and it's a fun place to be on a Friday. I do miss it when I'm not there, and I'm hoping that as I check my calendar, that today is actually a day I can attend. I hate work. Yeah. So let's go, Ray Moonies. I will be back on Monday with more of this. I'll be doing some Liquid Sky development over the weekend. If you are around, you're more than welcome to join the Discord if we're chatting there. It's a great place to be. It's a very great place to be. But thank you for joining me all. Have a great weekend if I don't see you around, and I'll be back on Monday. Take care.